We'll get everybody. Recorded. Welcome, everyone. We have a bunch of people joining right on time, so bear with us a few minutes while we let everybody in and get started. Great. Oops, no. Not there yet. Welcome, everyone. Thanks so much for being on time. We very appreciate it. A bunch more people are joining. While we're waiting, please, if you'd like, share in the chat your name, organization, job title, where are you based? Any of those things to introduce yourself to the group would be great while we're getting ready to start in about 1 or 2 minutes once we have let a few more people in. Oh, Hamilton families. I love Hamilton families. You all do great work for today. Oh, Women Voters of California, love it. Children's Hospital. Oakland Public Education Fund, you all do great work. JVS, love it. Oakland Literacy Coalition, shout out. Based in California and programs in Nepal at Sansar Maya. That's very cool.
Julie, can we close the waiting room and just admit people? Do you know?
That would be great. I think
I'm happy to keep admitting.
Yeah, no, that's a good thought. I think it's a thing that we would have had to do before we started the Zoom. I think it's a setting, unless you can see it under participants or the more dots. I see breakout room. It's not the same thing as the waiting room, is it?
Quite all right. Just wanted to check.
We can
dive in.
Yeah, always learning, always something new. Wait, one more second. Might as well get started in a second, but please, introduce yourself in the chat as you're all joining. It's so great to see everybody. Thank you for those of you in West Coast spending your lunch hour with us. We very much appreciate it. Alissa, do you think we should get going? Do you want to wait?
Let's do it.
Let's just jump in. All right, excellent. Welcome, everyone. We're so thrilled to be sharing with you a webinar series that we've come up with that we're hoping are going to have some tips, tricks, steps, and ways to support you in your work. All of your missions are so important, and we're happy to be here. I will get started with the quick agenda. We are going to do some introductions for who we are, set the stage with kind of the state of play of corporate engagement at the moment, talk about some corporate giving myths, and then get into what we're calling our corporate engagement steps that we'll get started with today. We'll make sure that we have time for Q&A at the end, but also feel free to put questions in the chat as we go along. But I think we're going to try to blow through the content first and make sure that we have plenty of time for questions near the end today. Alissa, do you want to do a quick?
Yeah. All right, everybody. We have 3 sessions ahead of us, and we hope that you can join us for all of them. You'll see here we're at our first session today. We're going to do an overview, and these are all going to build on each other. So they are going to be different content, each session. And today we're going to do overview and some of those engagement steps. We're going to do the additional engagement steps on the next session and walk through a case study, and then we'll round it out with some special guests with grants and sponsorships. So there's going to be 3 sessions in the series building on each other.
Excellent. Alissa, who are you? What are you doing here today?
Who are we? Where do we come from? So I'm just really delighted to be here with everybody that's joining us. Thank you for taking the time out of your day. I am A.May, and these webinars are an effort to really get out of my brain information and conversations that I had a number of times, and I've had a number of times with nonprofit partners, and it happens so often. So I just wanted to be able to share this information with the world. And I was sharing that with Julie. We were chatting and she said, well, why don't we do some webinars? And I said, that's a great idea. So here we are. So I've been doing social impact work for over 15 years. Most recently, I was at Salesforce leading Salesforce's employee volunteering and giving programs. And what that equated to was global programming for over 80,000 employees and over 40,000 community partners that we were engaging in one way or another. I also have a consulting practice that centers around building social impact and ESG strategy at the ground floor with startups and small and emerging companies called A.May Consulting. And I've been doing that for the past about 6 years now. And I am joined here with my fast friend and confidant, Julie. And Julie, tell us about your amazingness.
Hi, everyone. I'm so thrilled to be co-presenting with you, Alissa. And we've had a lot of fun putting this together and really thinking about, things that I wish I would have known working in nonprofits for over 15 years and getting a little bit under the hood and behind the veil with Alissa, who's been on the other side of things. So I've been in nonprofit management for over 15 years with a stint in between there where I went and got my PhD in literature with a focus in children's literature. I've worked for organizations like the Philharmonia Orchestra in London, the Harry Potter Alliance, and my last full-time gig was as development director at Tandem Partners in Early Learning here in the Bay Area. Started my consultancy in late 2019, which was a great time to really, start your own thing right before 2020. But since then, I've worked with some great organizations, including JVS, the Oakland Public Education Fund, Always Dream Foundation. I've been an interim executive director, interim development director, grant writer, and everything in between, with my free time spent serving on a lot of board of directors and being involved with New Leaders Council, including as a lead trainer for them. So I will continue us along and set the stage for kind of where we're at today, why this information really matters, where corporate giving has been and where it's going. So Alissa, if you want to take over, and I will let some folks in as that's happening.
Yeah. So I think it's really important for us to start with some context. I do want to point out, and this one thing I just learned about you, the Harry Potter Alliance, Julie. I need to hear more about this at some point. Just wanted to point that out. That's awesome. Amongst all the other awesome organizations that you've worked with. So what we're going to be focusing in on today, and the conversations that we're going to have over the next few weeks, are really around company or corporate initiatives and funding opportunities. So how do you, as a nonprofit professional, as a CSR professional, how do you improve or start building sustainable funding strategies? And what is out of scope, and what we're not going to be talking about, are other funding vehicles. So private and family foundations, DAFs, which are donor advised funds, government grants, major gifts, other funding vehicles. Like I said, that is kind of out of scope, what we're not going to be discussing over the course of the next few sessions. Also, getting that first donor, if you're a new nonprofit and you're new to the scene, starting your first fundraising efforts, we're not going to be discussing how to kind of jumpstart. These are kind of ways to improve or look at your corporate engagement strategy. Launching a new nonprofit, how to put together a comprehensive fundraising plan. We're not talking about all the components of a fundraising plan. We're really honing in on the corporate element here. That's where I've sat and where my bread and butter is. And Julie's been working with corporations and nonprofits too. So that's where we think we can add the most value here. So just wanted to make sure.
Can always do more of these. So if there's interest on other things, please let us know.
Absolutely. And we'll ask that in the survey for sure. So let's move us forward. We live and eat delicious alphabet soup in this world. And so again, for context and just make sure we're all on the same page, let's just talk about some of the acronyms that we work within, that we are going to hear, that are going to come up for us as we talk through these corporate funding models. So I'm just going to run through each one of these. I think it's really beneficial for us to know. I think they come up a lot in conversation. I know when I have conversation with nonprofits, the acronyms are running. So we'll start from the top. CRA, this is the Community Reinvestment Act. CSR, Corporate Social Responsibility. CAF or DAF, we talked about that on the last slide, the Corporate or Donor Advised Funds. DEI, DEIB, DEIBA, JEDI, these all have some similarities: diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, and acceptance. J is justice, excuse me. EHS, that's environmental health and safety, or employee health and safety, depending upon the company that you're at. ESG, environmental, social, and governance work. ERG, employee resource group, sometimes referred to as BERG, business employee resource group. And SDG, the Sustainable Development Goals. So that's just a small sampling. If you have others that are top of mind, please type those into the chat if we've missed some that come up for you time and time again. Would love to hear from you on that. I'll be watching the chat and I can share more on those. But yeah, that's the alphabet soup that we live in. Let's talk about a little bit about where we're at in time. So we have kind of the nomenclature, what's in scope, what's out of scope, and now let's talk about where we're at in 2023. So I think it's really important to understand and recognize the context where we're at. So I've been at this for, like I said, over 15 years. And what I will say is that the programs that we run on the nonprofit and the CSR side are definitely affected by the business cycle. So anyone that has studied that or has their MBA or understands what that is, or just lives in society for the past 15 years. I wish it wasn't the case, but a lot of these naturally occurring market forces help, but also hinder progress in our programming and our fundraising. So there are going to be natural periods of growth and expansion, as you'll see on here. So go backwards in time to 2017, 2018, that's the period of expansion. We had some good days leading into 2019, early 2020. And then there are some natural periods of contraction that occur. So moving from 20 to 2022, things started contracting. We're in a pretty good trough at this point, 2022, 2023. And then the expectation is that the cycle will kind of reset again and rinse and repeat over time. So for the fundraisers here that are on the line, this might feel familiar to you, for the CSR professionals as well, in terms of the funding that you have available to you in your programs, or just the funding that's coming from corporations to your nonprofit. So during those expansion periods, you can capitalize on those larger dollar grants and gifts. During the, the contraction periods, you're going to see some of those grants being rescinded, being stopped. How about, can I see maybe a raise of hands or a yes, definitely, if this resonates with you, if this is something that you have felt in the market at the moment. No one's felt it? Oh, I see. Yeah, I see some hands being raised. Good, good, good. can type into the chat to a resounding yes. So what we're going to walk through today, hopefully we'll share how to keep a more consistent and reliable funding stream going for you that is not as affected by this economic cycle. So at this moment where we sit today, like I said, we are in a contraction period. Companies are focused on profit, profitability, profit margin. They are not focused on increasing their budgets in the corporate social responsibility space and the foundation space. So these funding opportunities are drying up. We're contracting, like I said. So we're going to do a little dive into how we can build some sustainability moving forward. So Julie, I'm going to do a little bit of data first. Let's talk about some data. We always like to have a little data to back up what we're talking about. So the conference board does a great corporate citizenship and giving survey. This is some of the information that just came out recently. I'm going to draw your attention to two places in particular, and then we'll move on from this data-rich slide. The first is under the heading there on the left, what CSR leaders expect to be their largest obstacles. And you'll see at the top there, 2022 and 2023, it's lack of resources. So I felt this very strongly. And even in good and expansion times in the corporate philanthropy space, these teams are strapped. They are small in comparison to other departments within a company, sales, marketing, engineering. We're certainly not as well resourced as those particular departments. So there's always a feeling of lack of resources, I would say, that has increased and does increase in these kind of contraction moments. The second place I want to draw your attention to is a chart there on the right, is the expectations around budget. So I would say the word stable feels a little bit misleading to me, and I'll share why. What I experienced in my time at Salesforce and what you see here since 2021 is what we call a flat budget. So what that means is the money, while it remains stable, it's remaining flat. So we have the same amount of budget, we have increasing number of employees, and at the company level, we're also being asked to do more with less. So a flat budget does not mean that it's making it easier on anyone in the CSR space. So I just wanted to draw your attention to those two places, and we'll talk more, and you're going to hear more about how we can build some sustainability over time. So Julie, we've got some more data for you.
Yeah, before I move to the next slide, this actually just makes me think, I think for those of us who sit in the nonprofit fundraising seats, it's very surprising to me. I think we often stereotypically see the CSR corporate side as, the land of milk and honey. And, oh, well, they've got the resources, they've got the structures, they've got the teams, we're the ones who are kind of strapped for doing more with less, right? Hearing that same phrase that I think nonprofits say so much coming from kind of a CSR professional is interesting to me. And so this does feel right to you that like it's something that within your teams and in your experience, it always feels like you're also expected to kind of do more with less. That's just of interest to me, not having been in that space. Okay. Is that yeah, that sounds,
yeah,
that fits with what you're feeling when you were in that. Yeah.
Melissa says yes.
Yeah.
And I say yes too.
Yeah. Excellent. All right. Well, we'll keep going, and maybe we can speak more to that at the end, because that's quite interesting to me. So let's stay on that kind of data train. I love data. As we all know, philanthropy, fundraising, giving is about balancing out the head and the heart. And so let's stay on the kind of head data side for a second. And what I kind of want to call attention to here is more the wider philanthropic data from the last year, which was 2022, showing that, individual giving is by and far, vastly outweighing all other kinds of giving, with corporate actually coming in as the smallest piece of the pie. So we'll get into sort of the implications for that as we talk about corporate engagement. But for now, just wanted to plant the seed for everybody to realize that corporations are made of individuals and are staffed by individuals. And so there is going to be a synergy there around some of the principles of individual engagement and how to use that to improve and maximize corporate engagement. It's a little behind, getting ready for what we're going to be talking about later on. But first of all, wanted to just go over, as we were putting this together, quite a few months ago, we came together to talk about this, and I think we said, oh, we'll do it in August. That's plenty of time away, and here we are. But we put out a survey to some nonprofit friends and partners to hear a little bit about where they're at and where their pain points are. So I just want to briefly share this with you. For the size of organization of folks that we've engaged with, we've got a couple of really large development and volunteer management teams, and around 32% of my small and mighty warrior teams. So those are where it's one or none focusing full time on fundraising and development. Similarly, there's about a 50-50 split for people and organizations that have somebody full-time able to devote to corporate engagement, and others not. And so we're hoping with our kind of 6 steps towards corporate engagement, you either focus on steps 1 and 2 because you are small and you want to get started. Maybe you're further along and it's going to be step 5 that will be, oh, I hadn't considered that before. And so you'll get to plug and play based on the size and the sophistication of the systems you already have in place. Biggest pain points were around grants and sponsorships, and we will be getting into those most specifically in session 3. But what we want to think too is how to get outside of that or around that in order to build true sustainable corporate engagement by building systems that have multiple touch points for our partnerships. Another big challenge is finding aligned companies. We'll be touching on that as well. If people had to choose one goal, the large main focus is again on sponsorships and grants, and that's great. And some of the things we will talk about have to do with that. But a main focus of what we're talking about here is going to be on other ways to strengthen relationships with companies in order to unlock other supports and also end up improving your grants and sponsorship success. There's a clear fixation here on what people mean when they say corporate engagement, that it almost just means grants and sponsorships. And we're going to be challenging that a little bit and challenging some widely held myths as well. So I will hand it back to Alissa. Oh, actually, just kidding. Sorry, one more. These were just some questions again in our survey or in the registration form. Some people, you all came up with some great questions, and I just kind of wanted to honor that. Just put these up here briefly. These will all be addressed in some shape and form in the coming 3 sessions. And so, we've got people who are really new to the space, wondering about getting started. And then a couple more like specific things and where we're at today. Where do you start? So on to you for some corporate giving myths.
Thank you for that, Julie. Yeah, I think that information about what you're all thinking, and thank you for taking that initial survey. It really helped us to inform what we're sharing here today. So some of the myths, we're going to share a couple, and we're going to try to debunk those throughout the sessions. So I'm going to share a couple from here. So let's talk about this grants and sponsorship myth. So what often happens is you're building a new relationship with a company potentially, or you want to. And you think grants and sponsorships, that's where it's at. That's what I'm going to go for. The first thing I'm going to ask for. And I think that happens quite often. I don't know if you have done that, or if that's something that might have been something that you have engaged with it, it sounds like the visuals are the small. I'm not sure. The slide, Erica, is it too
I think they're a
small?
little blurry, I'm noticing on my other screen here. There's not much I can do about that right now. I'm so sorry. We will send out the recordings and the slides.
The deck, yeah.
Yeah, I can't read the win-win infographic.
Oh, and that's okay. I'll walk through a few things there. So the other myth is that companies only allocate high dollar amounts, or they only have budgeted funds for grants and sponsorships, and there really aren't other places or buckets of money to go looking for. And you'll see here that infographic that is blurry that you can't really read. On the nonprofit side, a lot of the benefits that you're going to see in terms of grants and sponsorships are very short term and short lived. So increasing your exposure and awareness at the moment, you might acquire a couple, new supporters from that particular sponsorship. But what you don't see in this infographic for nonprofit benefit is that it builds a sustainable funding model for you. So that's just something that we wanted to point out. These are two myths that we think exist in the market, and we're going to talk a little bit more about ways to debunk these myths. Some other myths that have come up, and this one is very near and dear to me. So a lot of nonprofit folks think that the best way to gain access to whatever funding there is to connect with the CSR department or the social impact staff. And additionally, the other best way is to just cast a really wide net and send, all companies and see what comes up, see what rises to the surface for you. Sending a general overview to as many corporate professionals as you can. And again, a couple myths that I think are out there, and I want to dive a little bit more deeply into this one in particular. So I don't know if this may resonate with folks on, the CSR friends or the nonprofit friends that we have on the line today, but I will say the number one most received piece of communication that I got in the almost 6 years I was with Salesforce goes something like this. Dear Alissa, CSR person, I work for XYZ nonprofit that does amazing things. Here's our annual report, a really colorful brochure, and 3 one-page PDFs that outline what we do. I'd love to connect with you and discuss partnership opportunities. Please let me know a date and time that works for you. Sincerely, nonprofit person. So how many of you have either received this note or sent this note? Raise your hand. Michael sent that email. It looks like Erica, guilty. Katie, Katie, good to see you here. Yes, so this is another piece of communication that you think may be effective, but we're going to talk through perhaps some other ways to approach that you might not have to keep sending these emails. So let's talk a little bit about these pathways, the 6 steps that we're going to talk through with you. We're going to get to a couple of them today.
Great.
So over to you, Julie.
When Alissa and I were going over this, I have also done this. And I was like, but Alissa, the colorful brochure, like that's going to make all the difference. Like I didn't just send the email, I sent attachments. And she was like, oh no, that's, so I was like, we got to put that in there too.
And I didn't put in a lot of context there, but we talked about it. Like these teams are very small at companies, and we have global purview. So it's very difficult to make any decision around nonprofit partnership that, that unless it aligns with the strategic focus areas of the company, it's going to be really hard to do one by one. Like I said, we had 40,000 community partners that we worked with. I certainly did not talk to every single one of those 40,000, or, I did maybe get 40,000 emails. But it's really, if you can think about it, it's quite impossible to be able to read and respond to something at that volume.
So if it's not that email and it's not necessarily grants or sponsorships, how can, organizations effectively engage corporations in supporting the mission? I was reflecting, and one of the attractive things that I think about grants and sponsorships is that they often come with a fixed format, questions and answers and a deadline and a portal to submit it through. And all of that can feel very attractive and helpful because it seems like it's a clear next step and that you're doing the right thing. And so what we're going to suggest now for our first couple of steps of engagement goes back to that point and thought that I said before, that companies are made up of people and of individuals. They're staffed by people. As Alissa said, she, as the CSR person, could not manage 40,000 community relationships, but the 40,000 people who work and are engaged at Salesforce could each manage one. And so that's how, we're going to talk to begin with supercharging your corporate engagement by strengthening individual engagement. So we'll cover all 6 steps to this session and the next session, but let's start with the first 2 for today. First and foremost is, do you have a system in place for tracking your individual donors? And what do we mean by that? Alissa?
Exactly. So we're all starting to think about, gosh, like Julie said, it's already August. We start to think about end of year and planning for end of year and our holiday campaigns and what does that look like? And this tip, I think, is really tantamount to enable success and should really be, in any corporate giving strategy, it should be your starting point before you do anything else, is make sure your systems and data house are in order. It's so important. It's going to make your life so much easier as you grow and you get larger. So let's make sure that you have the technology and systems in place to gather and track the company data that you need and nonprofit data if you're on the CSR professional side. This road goes both ways. You must have an easy way of seeing who, where, how many, all these what companies, all these things that sometimes aren't top of mind if you're focused and honed in on grants and sponsorships in the corporate space. So what is your CRM? Where are you managing this data? And by CRM, that should have been on our list, wasn't there? That's a customer relationship management tool. And there's a variety of them out there. I'm not going to advise on which piece of technology you should adopt, but what I will say is that you should have something, and it should have some fields. So are you tracking folks who are already in your organization and supporting your work? Some fields to consider we have here. Make sure that you at least have, if an individual works at a particular company, if there's matching gift eligibility, where does that individual sit? What is their job title? And of course, you're going to want to know what's the donation amount, how much volunteer time have they contributed. So for the nonprofit folks on the call, how many of you type into the chat definitely? And you can also say, nope, certainly not. If asked this question, could you confidently and easily find this data? How many people in your system work at any company? Microsoft. Where do they reside? What is the total amount of dollars or hours given? So how many people from Microsoft? Where are they? And what are the total amount of dollars or hours given? Allison says yes, thankfully. Jonathan, yes. It's easily and you can confidently pull this data. That's wonderful. So maybe you all can share with others.
Yeses, yeah. I've definitely worked with clients and companies who have the people and the amounts and the date of the gift. And I would say that where the person works and their job title and whether that company is eligible for matches is probably not yet. And so this is an important first step. And I see in the chat, because they don't capture that info at the time of donation. And so what is a non-intrusive way to do that? I've got some thoughts, but Alissa, I'll let you go if you've got any.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're gonna cover it pretty quickly here, in terms of in your data collection. There are some great services out there that non-intrusively capture this data for you. Allison has a suggestion there, which I love. If others have suggestions, please bring those forward. So like I said, just let's make sure that you have a tool in place, and then you're going to overlay that with some pretty important fields that you need to have to build towards that sustainable funding model that we're going to talk more about. So those fields are just the basic ones. You can get much more detailed. Like Allison said, wealth screening software is going to show income level. It's going to show like many other components. But just make sure that you have at least these basics that you can pull at a moment's notice.
And
so that's step number one.
Yeah, I think to Jeff's point is one of the things that might have to happen to implement this step is to change the fields on your donor software to start gathering that, right? So wealth screening systems will be really helpful if you already have a database of donors that you want to run through it and almost catch up. But also setting up your systems in place moving forward is really important in order to continue to have really robust data that you can work with down the line.
Yeah.
All right, Q&As for as we keep going, but should we go to number 2?
Yeah, let's do step number 2.
Because it builds on that.
Yeah. And we're going to get to answering some of these great questions you all have. Okay, so step number 2, you've got your systems in place. You've got that on lock, very organized. And a lot of you do, which is great. The next step is you're going to look at matching. So you're going to want to implement a matching gift program for any current or future donors that you have. So this is the highest dollar way to exponentially increase your donations with, hardly thinking at all, and getting to some of the pots of money that corporations have that are much larger than the grants and sponsorship. So let's talk a little bit more what that looks like. So I saw in the chat there are a few, double the donation has, in my opinion, has kind of cornered the market, but there are giving softwares out there that also have it, to Katie's point, Benevity, and there's a few others that you can make sure that you as a nonprofit are registered in. So you're going to want to make sure that you are signed up for one of these. And also, like Julie said, making sure on your donation form that you have the fields that are going to be helpful to you. And this is really going to streamline this process considerably for you. And then on the CSR professional side, my team was responsible for updating all of our policies annually. So double the donation, we worked with them on an annual basis to make sure that our information was updated in their system, because sometimes your matching increases or it decreases, or it was 1-to-1 and now it's 1-to-2, or you just have to make sure that those things are updated on the company side. And what I will share is, most companies are going to have a 1-to-1 match, and starting there, that's kind of the ground floor and the industry standard. But there are companies that have that run specific campaigns, sometimes during crisis moments, sometimes not, based on their strategic focus areas, that can run a 2-to-1 or a 3-to-1 or even a 4-to-1 match. So Amy's got some good suggestions there too, to take a look at. Classes too integrates with one of those CRM softwares that will go unnamed. which is another great one to think about. So keeping this in mind, there's a couple stats there too. You're going to see 65% of Fortune 500 companies offer a matching gift program. Doesn't mean they do a great job at promoting it and sharing that they have it, but companies certainly have them, and it's quite standard, like I said today. And then only 1 1/3% of individual contributions are matched at the average nonprofit organization. So there is a huge pot of money that nonprofits are missing out on if you are not matching your individual contributors that are sitting at companies. So that is step 2. Julie, do you have anything? You have a couple things to add here.
I do,
actually.
I do, absolutely. Always. I always have things to say. One of the points that I think I wanted to get across at this juncture is that for better or for worse, it's kind of on nonprofits to be the ones to educate their donors and support their donors in finding how to do matching within their companies. So here's an example that American Express and Microsoft are actually 2 corporate kind of outliers who internally really push and champion their matching gifts program as part of internal KPIs, organization-wide, and et cetera. And you can see the results that they have a really large percentage of their employees who use the matching donation systems. But you can see in comparison, you know, a lot of organizations, even if they have matching, the employees aren't using it. And 19% on average of companies actually include information about their corporate matching systems and how to access them to employee resources such as like a handbook or an internal wiki. So the information isn't there for the staff. And so it's one of those things that, you know, similar to the CSR email we put before, if you're sending out emails to your donor, hey donor, you know, thanks for your work, please get it matched. We'll be able to do more work, sincerely nonprofit person. They might not know where to go with that, and then, you know, are on their back foot a little bit, feeling like they have this extra work to do. And so, you know, how can you support them in these ways? Like, you are going to have to be the one to really do some donor education and make sure that there are some systems in place. So, you know, make sure in the donation process itself, you're not just asking for their company, but kind of sharing why that's important. I think there's another stat I've got, but also make sure that it's clearly across your website, you know, that like, did you know that most employers will double or even triple your amount doing X number of good for the communities that we serve, in your communications, and also in donor outreach, to have that be a like common question of, you know, not just can we have a gift at this amount, not just what types of programs are you interested in serving, but where do you work, and, you know, can we support you in getting the matching gifts? It's a reason that this falls under kind of our corporate engagement strategies. If someone gives you $10 and it's matched by their employer, say American Express, you now have $10 from American Express. Like, they are now a corporate contributor to your organization. So that's a great metric to later on be able to include in your sponsorship or grant application of like, we're so grateful that 16 of your employees already give to our organization, and that you have already supported our work in the amount of $450 or however much the matching gift has been worth, for instance. And last kind of statistic I'll leave here is a recent report from Blackbaud, another agency that's in this space. The average gift from an employee, including company match, is over $1,000. It's $1,120, which is really interesting to think on my end, that if fewer than 2% of individual gifts are being matched from that earlier statistic, but the average plus match is over $1,000, like that's a lot of money that's being left on the table, not just from individuals that are, you know, being matched, but from the corporate side that can be engaged from there. This little GIF that's going over is just an example. I think it's from Double the Donation. Again, don't work for them, not getting anything from them. It just seems to be the system that has really taken over this one specific part of the world. And so just using that as a way that, you can integrate this into your website and get this information as it's going. But at the very least, as whatever system you're using, start asking people for which company they're working at. Okay. I'm going to take a breath for a second. Alyssa's going to take a breath.
Take a breather.
As we start thinking about questions and going back through the chat. But the first thing that we want to bring up is an apology. Some stuff has come up and we're unable to do next week. So we're going to be moving sessions 2 and 3 back by 1 week. So session 2 will take when session 3 was going to happen on August 17th. Session 3 will happen on August 24th. So just kind of want to do that. I'll update the calendar invites as soon as we are done here today. But next webinar, we're diving into 4 additional steps that will build upon. I mean, I was really impressed to see so many of our nonprofit partners here today be like, yep, I know how many people work at Microsoft. I know how much they give. I know how much matching they've had. That's amazing. And the next few that we've got for you, hopefully will be of interest as well. But anyone have any questions regarding these first 2 steps? Or I thought, since we're all here today, does anything surprise you from what we've shared around the state of play? You have any questions for Alissa and I? Either or you want to lift up some great successes or horror stories, corporate engagement. It's always good to hear other people's experiences, I think. So I'm gonna pause for a second and also go and review the chat briefly.
Yeah, so we've got one question that's in there from Serena V. If someone already donated separately on your platform, can they still match their donation, or do they have to donate via Benevity? I think typically if they've already donated and they sit at a company, they can always request a match regardless of what platform they've donated on. So I think if it is via Benevity, it makes the process easier, and you're already on Benevity, you can request it pretty quickly, but a match can certainly be requested retroactively or after the fact, for sure. Some companies have boundaries around timeframes that can be requested. So it's not like into perpetuity. I made a donation 5 years ago for $5,000. Can you match that now? But at Salesforce, it was 60 days that we gave employees to claim their match. Other companies, they give a year, a little bit more generous there, but it depends on the company. And oh, go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to say that also speaks to importance of systems, that you are automating or getting thank you / gift receipts to the person very quickly, because honestly, I'm surprised, Alissa, 60 days seems quite short in some ways for a company to kind of close the window on. But I also think if you're working with Benevity or some other structured system, it should be simpler than, there are some companies where literally, you fax the gift receipt to the HR manager or something, and that would take a little bit longer.
Yeah, and I was going to ask, Julie, can people come off mute or just type into the chat their questions?
Yeah, whichever people are comfortable with.
Thank you, Jeff. Nice to hear. Would love to hear, folks, if anything. Here we go. Paula, how common is it for companies to have certain organizations, nonprofits that they've selected as being eligible for matching versus giving their employees freedom to select their own? Really good question. I'll take a stab at that, Julie. If you have anything to add, please do. I think it's becoming more industry standard now in terms of employee experience and culture at a company to matching is offered as a benefit, and companies want to be able to match wherever they can. Whatever organization an employee is interested in. I would say you rewind CSR programming about 20 years ago, there was kind of a selected list that you could choose from. I don't think that is any longer the direction that this is going. Most companies are going to match to verified organizations that that they've vetted, and a lot of times third-party vendors will do that for the company. Benevity, Your Cause, there's a number of different platforms that will vet the organizations to make sure they are legit. So it is quite common, I would answer that question. So it's that employees do have the freedom to donate wherever they wish. And if the organization, say you're a brand new organization, you're just starting, you just got your 501c3, and you're like, gosh, I don't if I'm not already registered in Benevity and all these places, what do I do? I think double donation is a good place to start. That's a good kind of catch-all, and then go to kind of the larger providers and make sure that you're listed and that they vet your organization to be approved to get matching. But that's, again, that's like step number 2 in you building out your corporate strategy, is making sure that you're in all those places, that you're up to date in those places. Do you have anything to add there, Julie?
No, I'm going to move to this final slide just so that people can start doing the survey if they would like, but we can obviously 10 more minutes do more Q&A. I did want to, we've mentioned Benevity a number of times, and Alissa, I'm not sure, someone said, can you name the top 3 big matching systems? And I think for me, I'm not sure if they're even specific to matching, but if I were a new nonprofit and wanted to make sure that my nonprofit was visible places, I would start with Benevity. Also, Great Nonprofits is almost like a Yelp review type place. But I think I would want to make sure that I'm registered there. And I'm also registered on, is it Candid? That has kind of the clearinghouse of nonprofits. And I'll get the actual name. I'm blanking on that for a second, but you can get seals of transparency through Candid. And I think that's another place that you want to go and fill out your profile, because people at corporations or individual donors or other things are going to come and want to learn about your organization, and it's great for visibility.
Yeah, and I think I named a couple others. Your Cause is out there. Double the donation, of course, we've already said a few times. None of these we're affiliated with. It's just in our experience. I think, these were ones that seem to be the industry leaders at this point. None of them really fall for all of the challenges that exist in the corporate space and also the nonprofit space either. Just as an aside, and I think Charity Navigator too is a really good place, because that's where a lot of the vetting ends up taking place, is that's how they're verifying, especially in the US charities.
And Charity Navigator, the downside with that is it's only once you're over a certain size. So I want to say like 3, 4, 5 million. So for smaller nonprofits, it can be a challenge of how do you get that visibility. And I think the difference between, so Benevity as an organization, you can go on to Benevity, list yourself as a charity, get your mission on there, list any volunteer opportunities you have, etc. Double the donation, I believe. I don't think you list yourself as a nonprofit. It's more a widget that people can search for companies, and the companies matching and volunteering and engagement systems.
Good point. I'm gonna, Christina Carl, if that outreach email, which she's sent verbatim, no shade, it's perfectly fine, isn't the best approach, what is a better outreach option? Really good question. And we're gonna get to that in the next session. We're gonna debunk that myth. So we'll share a little bit more about what that looks like and what the better outreach option is. And it might be surprising that it's not who you think it might be and where you think it might go. But I'm going to keep you in suspense, Christina, on that one, so we can see you at the next session. I know some companies will make a donation match. This is from Jillian Davis. Thanks for your question. When their employees volunteer with nonprofits, would softwares like Benevity also let people know if there are volunteer grant matches available at their company? I believe Benevity does have a way for a company to share, what is available. I know Double the Donation, whenever I talk to them every year and you register as a company, you share all of your giving options. So one of them is if there is a $1 for Doers program. We did not have one at Salesforce, but I know that other companies list that, and that's how that is surface. Kayla O'Neill just gave a good amount of resources. Going to plug Global Giving. Yeah, Global Giving is a good one too. You didn't remember. Okay, we're getting up to 5 minutes to the hour. Are there any other questions that we can answer at this point? We'll talk through kind of what's coming up in the next session too. You can take the survey. Got the QR code there. I'm going to type it into the chat for you all to click on. Of course, we're going to have a survey. It's real quick, real easy, real painless. You've got 5 minutes. You put an hour on your calendar today, so take the time now to take it.
Yeah, thank you, everybody, and appreciate the questions in the chat and all of that. And we will see you on the 17th. I'll go and change the calendar updates now. And thank you all so much. Really appreciate your time. I know how scheduled and overscheduled nonprofit people are, and really appreciate you showing up, and hopefully it was helpful.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks so much, everyone.